not you though.
No.
Oh.
Well, it is, but there's nothing in Edwardsville.
You know why? Because you wrote police department and I bet they don't use spot crime. I bet you that. That's weird.
I don't know that we have anybody on the screen watching. Okay, pull over that way.
Yeah.
I don't think we have anything going up in this side.
You should. You know
Uh-huh.
what? You should.
Too many bald
An
guys
officer
on
will
this
know.
side.
I bet any of those officers will know.
Balding.
I bet that's your issue.
Yep, probably.
Yeah. And you know who will know the answer to that? Believe it or not, Doug started in police, with police, doing data and detail sorts of stuff. Because it's
I just prefer to think that we have crime above the Prince River.
nice try, not happening. I did look over at Ryan though, and I said, "You've got all the crime in your area."
Is that right?
He does. Look. I mean, not just his area, but if you go down here and you look at that.
He's not doing a very good job, is he?
No, that's what I was gonna say, and then I didn't think you'd appreciate that. But then look at this. Go south of the river, Commissioner Walters, and look at that. Yeah, I can't wait to give McKiernan a hard time about that.
Could I ask you a question while you're
Yeah.
standing here? How come I cannot log into the agenda? First, I can't get my keyboard to work. Is there a reason, you think?
Your keyboard's not working?
Correct.
Okay. Well, a lot of times, all you have to do is just disconnect
Take it
it.
off, put it back on.
It was a known issue.
That seems to be working now. Okay, good.
Because this wasn't working, right?
No, nothing was right.
So that
Close
probably,
that out.
so that probably solved. That probably solved that problem.
I think it will ultimately be
Okay, so
very
what
good.
else was your issue?
The agenda system.
The agenda system?
Now you push it up.
Looks like we're gonna need to add a favorite for you for,
Actually, I think that would be nice.
Can I get through it here or somewhere? That's where I usually do. But,
it's not valid. We'll have to replace it.
yeah, that's what I was getting.
Are you gonna use it while you're?
All right,
sitting
for
there?
those of you who are here, we're still taking care of a couple of issues right here. We will get this meeting started in just a moment. I think we need to actually start scheduling a few minutes of break and transition between these meetings. Okay, we're ready to go? Well then, in that case, I'll start by saying we want to welcome everyone to this meeting of the Economic Development and Finance Standing Committee. Public comment is welcome. Anyone wishing to speak on any item that's on the agenda may do so when that item is up for discussion. You'll have 5 minutes to make your comments, and we would ask any member of the public who wishes to speak on an item to come to the podium, which is over here to my left, to your right, to make those comments, and you will be recognized. For accurate both recording and now broadcast purposes, we do ask that everyone either be at or very close to a microphone when they are speaking or presenting. So Mr. Bach and I were just talking about our setup here, and we do want anyone who's making a presentation, who's a part of our agenda, to definitely come to this table and to use the microphone and the keyboard and the projection materials at that table. And then if there's a member of the public who wishes to speak on an item, they can come to the podium, which is just a little bit further back and off to the side back there. With all of that as prelude, roll call, please.
Here? Here.
Here.
Here. Our first item of business is approval of the Standing Committee minutes from our December 2nd, 2013 meeting.
Move to approve. Second.
There's a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Those minutes are approved. That takes us to our committee agenda, and the first item on the committee agenda is a presentation on the North Point Village West Apartment Phase 2. Mr. Brakovich.
Commissioners, good evening. George Brakovich with Economic Development. And just again, I'd say kudos to our buildings and logistics staff for the design and setup of a great room. Nothing against the 6th floor, but this is an improvement. And I think Brent Miles is here with North Point, so I'll ask him to join me. I've got a few brief comments in terms of what we're doing with this. I think most of you are familiar with North Point and the projects they have going in our community, from multifamily all the way through industrial projects. But what we are here to talk about tonight is Village West Apartments, Phase 2. It is a new project separate from Phase 1, but connected in terms of geographic location. They are looking at the 15 acres immediately adjacent to the west-southwest of where Phase 1 is now. So we've been negotiating and discussing possible terms for the deal for Phase 2. And what we're finding is, I think both parties would like to see a very similar deal as to what we did in Phase 1. So from our standpoint, what's the request before us? So again, it's the use of revenue bonds, which would allow for a 10-year fixed pilot. That pilot, while it is fixed, would be a 0% tax abatement. So we would look at establishing a market value per unit, and then developing a pilot tax payment from that type of value. It's exactly what we did with the first phase as well. In terms of the project itself then, if we do a structure like that, our expectations are, I believe they call the first product luxury apartments. That's exactly what we're looking for. Same amenities package, same interior finishes, same type of services offered to the residents. In terms of design aspect, we were very deliberate in our negotiations for Phase 1 to be only 2 and 1 bedroom units. We would have that same expectation for Phase 2, and probably roughly, I would say the majority are going to be 1 bedroom units, hopefully 60% or greater. Maybe Brent can touch on that piece of it. Again, as I mentioned, it is the use of revenue bonds to work this project with that 10-year fixed pilot. Public infrastructure improvements. So when we did the first project, there needed to be a new road built. And so Delaware Parkway, moving west from 110th Street, was constructed. We realized that there was some share of that cost that needed to be footed by the UG. And so what we agreed to in the first deal structure was to rebate a portion of the UG share of the pilot back to North Point for covering those costs and building a larger road than what they really needed. So I guess in my layman's term, maybe their project needed a 2-lane road instead to service the 200 plus acres that would be serviced by this road in the future. They built a 4-lane parkway with a nice median. I would expect that the extension of Delaware Parkway for Phase 2 will be built in a similar construction style, and we probably need to just calculate what our share of that type of road cost would be. The additional part here is the creation of a new sanitary sewer line to service this project, as well as opening up a variety of new properties in that western corridor for us. I know Bob Roddy's here tonight in case you have any specific questions about the sewer line. What we're discussing is, in the past we've looked at creating a special benefit district to help offset the capital costs of putting that sewer line in. We know that other communities do like a system development fee and based on a formula for equivalent residency units. So we're looking at those options right now, and any feedback on exploring something that we haven't done before, we welcome those type of comments from you as we move through the negotiations. As with any deal, we have a high expectation on the local minority and women-owned business enterprises having a participation rate in the project. North Point has always willingly been at the table on that, and I did happen to ask our compliance department today how they were doing on their goals for the first phase of the project, and I believe I wrote it down. So the local minority and women would be 12, 6, and 4 in terms of percentages, and right now they're hitting 40, 22, and 18. And so I told Brent earlier that while that's fantastic, clearly we're far too lenient on our percentages in the first, and so expect a little tougher negotiation from us. So in terms of outlining what staff is here, we're here to say we need a little bit of direction or feedback from you, or if you think, hey, proceed and make this deal look like phase one, I think we can get there and hopefully come back in short order with the development agreement for your consideration at the February full commission. And again, with that, I'm trying to keep my comments fairly brief. I'll turn it over to Brent, and maybe he can talk a little bit about the success that they're having with phase one and what's prompted them to look at doing phase two.
Well, thanks. I'm Brent Miles with North Point Development, and some of you have had the pleasure to come out and see our product. Any of you that have not had a chance to, our clubhouse is open. Anybody in this room can come out and stop by anytime and visit and see the clubhouse and just kind of see what we mean by luxury. So if you'll give me just a couple minutes, we'll do kind of the pat ourselves on the back, because that's really why we're here tonight, is because of the success of phase one. And anybody that was at that groundbreaking remembers that this is a $34 million project. We didn't do a market study. We just knew inherently that there was a demand in this area. There was a product that didn't exist, and going with the highest end that we could go, and you all know what that is. That's the saltwater pool. That's the large fitness center. That's just the granite countertops and the stainless steel appliances that are in that unit. We went above and beyond to kind of set that high mark. Some of you have probably heard me say this. Briarcliff was heralded as probably the most successful suburban apartment project that happened in Kansas City when it was built. And we had pre-leased about 25 units at Briarcliff, which had never happened. No one had pre-leased apartments. And then our product at Burlington Creek, which is near Parkville, we had about 32 to 34 pre-leased. We have 42 leases in hand. We don't open our buildings for another 2 weeks. Our staff at Village West think we'll have at least 50. They're trekking towards a 52 to 55 pre-lease on phase one. And I only bring up those stats because it shows that our guests all in this room and as North Point were right. We knew that multifamily could exist. We knew that the market needed it there, and we knew that the amenities package that is Village West, which is the restaurants, the entertainment, the shopping, those were all key factors in why people located there. With that trajectory in mind, with 50% pre-leased, it's not unheard of that we could have somewhere between 150 and 200 leases done in the first 4 months. We have 306 units in phase one. Because of that demand, we feel that not only is the market deep enough, but to keep the momentum going, we'd really like to start delivering product, and we'd really like to start delivering that product in the spring to early summer of 2015. Our last building for phase one will be completed in mid to late August of 2014. So we'll have a little bit of lapse between the two projects, but they'll really come on the tails of each other. George mentioned the specifics of the development agreement. Basically, we kind of joked internally. Todd LaSalle is here, but I think there's 7 red lines from the first agreement to the second agreement. Basically, if it's not broke, why fix it? So the pilot, the Delaware reimbursement, those are the kinds of things that were really good for us and our investors to look at, and why we did the project and why it worked financially, and then to provide another phase. If you look at how many people live in each unit, somewhere between 1.7, 1.8 people per unit. So our first phase will generate about 500 people for the area, and the next phase again would be probably about 500 people as well. So we're going to have 1,000 residents. Mr. Bach had asked me if we could provide anything, and many of you have asked me where are the residents coming from? Where are the prospects coming from? Are these unified government employees? What are they? We have some rules about what we can and can't release in terms of demographic information, but we can say, and we studied it today, that our 3 largest employers are Cerner, University of Kansas Medical Center, and the base in Leavenworth. And the base in Leavenworth, if you look at, this is just some of the information that we've got. It's, I'm gonna totally botch this, but I call it the general school, the Lewis and Clark Leadership School, or whatever, you know what I'm talking about. So, you can kind of see the caliber of what people are looking for in the units. These are people that are renters by choice, and typically they're doing, if you've been out, they're doing the two bedroom plus den, which again is the $1,500 a month, and they're looking at that luxury package is why they're locating. So again, that's people that are new to our community. It's important to remember that you know, the whole goal of multifamily in this area was to say if somebody could plant a flag in one of our units, when they grow out of that apartment and they build a house or buy a house, that maybe they would live in Piper. So Charles is turning around again, very similar.
Brent,
stuff.
can I get you to be sure and talk into the microphone? I don't
sure.
think you can hear in the back of the room.
Oh, I'm sorry. Very similar, again, luxury. So we'd have amenities package, very similar to what we have in Phase 1, saltwater pool, trails, the nice fitness studio. This is a completely separate project. So there'll be another clubhouse, there'll be another fitness center, another pool. It'll be right next door to our first product, but it'll be essentially a standalone product. As you can see, we're going a little bit more craftsman style architecture. Obviously, we've still got to go through planning and zoning and public works and all that review in the spring here. But this is a new kind of style for us, a new architectural style, new color scheme. As you know from our first one, it's a kind of that gray and white, what I'd call almost a coastal, kind of a coastal theme. And again, trying to mix it up here a little bit with more of a craftsman style theme. But the interior of the units will be dead on the same, almost dead on the same as our first phase. So George mentioned the number of one bedrooms. I know that was important to, in particular, the school district, how many kids were going to be coming to the district. Again, we're right at 61% one bedrooms for this phase as well. And so it'll be heavily loaded towards the one bedrooms. And again, it's more of that Cerner, KU type of preferred employer. Again, if things go well here, and obviously development agreement would happen in February, we'd be going through the planning and zoning process through March, April, May, and then try to start construction soon after that.
This item really is coming forward today just for discussion, and so I'd ask if any of the commissioners have any comments, any questions, any suggestions, or any direction to give to Mr. Brakovich or Mr. Miles.
I'd suggest you put, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I would suggest you put the KU people as close to KU as you can get them. That would be my district.
I was pleasantly surprised. We didn't expect that. I thought maybe in the healthcare, a Providence or, one of the doctors, the local doctors, I didn't expect a KU, but,
Do you know the percentage of that?
if you give me a few minutes, I could probably, count them up. I have it here.
I was just curious.
In the meantime, Commissioner Townsend.
Happy New Year, gentlemen. Good to see you again. In the write-up, I noticed the word however, pilot represents a 0% tax abatement. So there's no tax abatement as for this, and there was none in phase 1? Okay. Is there any reason, it doesn't sound like I heard any, not to do what you've done with phase 1 in terms of the agreement? The development agreement.
No. I mean, and as far as the pilot structure goes, I mean, we still need to put that pilot in front of them, but to give you an idea of revenue generation, that there's a larger tract of property that's owned by a family trust, and so the balance of that is just under 200 acres, and what it produces on an annual basis in terms of property tax revenue is about $4,700. What we anticipate the base value of the pilot to be just for a 15-acre development, multifamily development of this nature would be about $240,000, somewhere in that neighborhood. So again, just taking a 15-acre chunk out of that 200, we would see a significant, both. I think that was basically what the pilots were at a starting point for phase one. So now you can double that if we're having two projects that are similar.
Again, as George said, between the two projects, about $500,000 a year in taxes off both projects. And to answer your question, Commissioner Murguia, 6 of the 42 leases are University of Kansas or the Med Center. So I don't have a split. Maybe some of those are going to Lawrence, I'm not sure.
Commissioner, I would like to clarify, I mean, it's 0% pilot. We did do a rebate on a portion on the first page because we required them to build a large 4-lane road. Typically, when a developer comes in, we require them to build their road to get to the access. We made it more of a boulevard, so for the expanded portion of it, they fronted the money and built the second half of that road as well. That's where we offered a rebate, which was essentially a little less than half of their property taxes for 2 years that they got back, what they're going to get back for that. We're contemplating that for this second phase because they'll extend the parkway or boulevard on down into that property, which from some aspects is a good assistance for future development to come into the area, and it meets the requirements that we want to go into it. And they're willing to front the capital for it, but we're giving them a rebate on that portion of it. But what's serving their development, they're paying for. I just wanted to make sure that was clear, because so there is a 2-year rebate portion, and that just comes off the unified government side. It doesn't come off of the school or community college side of that equation.
I did hear the rebate. Okay, no, that's fine, so.
I also,
Stop, broke, don't fix.
I would like to talk about the sewer portion of this a little bit. We have and Bob, you might want to come up so we can get into this a little bit more. George, I don't know if you had something prepared for this side of it, but what we're looking at is serving this development as it goes. Right now, the developer would have to come in and put a pump station on site, and that's just part of their development costs. They would come in and build it. What we've looked at with water pollution is an opportunity for us to take this property and go ahead and connect it into our sewer line going north, which is the natural flow of how this property should go. So Bob, let me turn this over to you. I'd like you to tell the commission what we're looking at and why it makes sense, and we think this is a direction we'll probably be coming back to you with a recommendation for.
Over the last decade, we've been, as a commission policy, it's been to expand sewer system in the Missouri watershed. Basically, from parallel going north, all that water flows to the Missouri River. 15 years ago, there was very little treatment plants, pipes in the ground or anything. So over the years, we've been investing with the idea that in the future, there's the water needs to flow the way that God made it. So right now, we have an interim treatment plant down on the Missouri watershed, and we've been building interceptors going up the valleys ever since then. This is just another extension of that overall plan. And the beauty of this, I was sitting back there, I was listening to the whole presentation. You know, one of the strategic goals that the commissioners recommended is that we look at private-public partnerships, where we try to leverage the private dollars into a public investment to expand the good that's brought to the community. And this is a perfect example of that, because what's happening, in lieu of them spending $250,000 on another pump station that I don't want to maintain, we're having that money invested into an interceptor that will open up 800 acres to the west of the Legends. When you think about the Legends, you know, the Legends is basically locked in on 3 sides. So now this provides the nucleus for, future expansion into the 1,000+ acres west of the Legends. We've worked with North Point, and we think that we have a calendar that will work with them. There will be the requirement for a capital budget revision, assuming that this development agreement proceeds. And in addition, there will be a proposed ordinance that would add a surcharge on the other people that connect to the sewer in this watershed. The idea is, we don't want to invest $2 million into a watershed and that the property owners are basically are the sole beneficiary of that. We want to make sure that they pay a proportional share, which is not unlike what we've done in the past. We generally, if we're making a public investment, we generally like the community to participate in those shared benefits and costs. So that's the concept. We think it's a no-brainer, and we're encouraged to proceed.
It really allows us to leverage North Point's investment, that instead of just putting in a pump station that doesn't serve the greater good, it goes toward the greater sewer system. We're not recommending a property assessment, which would be somewhat punitive on the landowners in that area now that aren't doing anything. But there is an equation that we develop that if they do develop their property and need to hook in, then they'll pay their fair share, as they would to come in and hook to it. So it allows us to leverage money that we're getting into the project area up front. Water pollution would then bond it into their project areas, and as the rest of that area starts to develop in around it, then they would feed dollars into that program.
Any other comments or questions? I have been lucky enough to have seen the property, and thank you for showing it to me. I think it's absolutely spectacular, and I at least would encourage you to move ahead with plans for Phase 2. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Item number 2 on our agenda tonight is budget revisions for the fourth quarter of 2013 that are revisions that are $10,000 or greater. And Reginald Lindsay, Budget Director, is here for that report.
Can I move for approval on this? I mean, it's pretty straightforward, the chart is. I don't know,
Yes, you may.
unless Reginald, you're gonna be bummed out, you don't get to present.
Well, there's a few things that are different about it with the budget policy that we just passed. Just kind of go through it a little quick if you didn't mind.
Go ahead.
The first table there is for $50,000 budget revisions that were over $50,000. This is what we just passed, where we'll bring budget revisions that were over $50,000 to the commission as soon as they're available the month after for the stand committee. So that's what that sheet is. The next sheet are ones that are $10,000 to $50,000. And then also I have 2 memos for 2 budget revisions that are pending. One is for the Sheriff's Department. The Sheriff's Department, they're going to be like $587,000 over budget this year. We immediately need to do a budget revision for $75,000. We immediately need to do a budget revision for $75,000 to pay local municipalities that house our inmates. If there is any question about that, Sheriff Ash is here to answer those questions. And then also,
Reggie, pull the mic up so you can get it.
we're doing a budget revision for banking fees. These banking fees weren't initially budgeted. They're for $446,000. They will be netted by $752,000 in revenues that we receive.
Let me just clarify on that last one. Based on what I know about these, it would be incorrect to say that they weren't budgeted, meaning they weren't accounted for. They were accounted for, they simply weren't explicitly listed as part of the budget. Would that be correct?
Yes, we have a new requirement from our auditor where we used to net these against the revenues, but now we have to break them out as their own separate expense, so the revenues and the expenditures can't be netted anymore.
So these had always been accounted for in terms of creating the budget. You just are now explicitly listing them as part of the budget. So it's simply a change in how the reports are presented to us, not in terms of how the budget's created.
Yes.
Move for approval?
Second.
There is a motion and there is a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Aye.
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 Aye. And I'd like to thank Reggie and Lou for coming forward tonight and bringing those reports. And as we had just talked about in our last meeting with the budget report revision that we just did, the policy revision that we just did, we will begin to get routine reports from Reggie and Lou now with budget revisions. So thank you very much. Yes, ma'am.
Just one brief comment. First of all, this is very easy to understand. It was a very helpful report. And I also think, surprisingly, I didn't count on it being helpful at our annual budget meetings, but I think it will be. I had no idea that we would adjust the budget by almost, or over $1 million every 2 months. I mean, it may not happen every 2 months, but if you're just looking at these first 2 months as an example of what might happen in the next 2 months and the next, we're looking at a $6 million fluctuation in our budget over the year. I don't know, in a $250 million budget, it really isn't that much money, I guess. But I don't really know what the standard norm is, so as time goes on, we don't have to discuss that tonight. It'll be interesting to see, to watch that and to see what happens. So it was very easy to understand, I appreciate the effort.
Well done. Thank you.
Thank you.
That brings us to item number 3 on our agenda this evening, and that is the adoption or the presentation for adoption of our final series of financial policies. And just to review, we have had Lou Levin brought forward 9 policies that he wanted the commission to review and hopefully approve regarding finance. We have been through 6 of those. The final 3 were distributed at our last meeting, and they come back to us today for final discussion and for a vote.
I think, Commissioner, you've correctly summarized where we are on these policies. We last month, we presented the policies and actually reviewed those policies in a little more detail. We don't have any further presentation at this time. Rick McKessick of our accounting department's here, Reginald Lindsay, and I believe George Brakovic is still here, if there's any questions related to the 3 specific policies before you.
Any questions, any comments, any discussion on the 3, our accounting, auditing, and financial reporting, risk management and internal controls, and then local economic development?
I have a question on the local economic development.
Yes.
I've lost my computer temporarily, so I'll talk from memory. But in the documents that were circulated, there was a listing of all the economic development tools that we have. And a couple of them struck me as something that I would like to have some further conversation about. And the first one is the TIF policy. I don't think I need that, thanks. I understand we have been using TIF regularly for years. And I also understand that several of our TIF programs or projects that are in existence are not performing well. But I don't see anything in our policy that really addresses that. So that's the nature of the discussion that I would like to have at some point, and to talk about what we do. Maybe we need to tighten our policy so that we don't get into so many non-performing or underperforming TIF projects. And we also, I think, could benefit from a discussion about what we do to follow up on these TIF projects that are not performing so that we just don't forget about them. So I don't know if that's appropriate now or whether we want to have a more expanded discussion about that at some point, but I think there is an opportunity for improvement of our policy statement regarding TIFs. Thank you.
I think that's an excellent question or a set of questions, and I would be very interested in seeing what kinds of other questions might develop out of this discussion, because it does seem to me that the TIF policy has been a significant commitment on the part of the unified government to development. And the question is, to what extent are these projects effective? How are we measuring that? And do we use that then as a guide to evaluate other projects that come forward?
Well, as a matter of fact, staff have been working on a detailed report on just what you ask. It wasn't ready to come to us tonight, and so we're going to hold it until, hopefully, have that for our next meeting. But they've gone back and developed a comprehensive report of TIF projects in terms of starting date of the project, financing date, how well it's performed over time, how well it's performed recently. And I think, having seen an early draft of that report, it will open the kind of discussion that you're looking for. And I would suggest that at the time we have that discussion, we reconsider this policy as to whether or not any updates or further changes need to be made to the policy, depending on how that discussion goes. So, in the best of all possible worlds, that discussion will come as early as next month to this committee.
I think to follow up on that just a little bit then, it would be really helpful, I think, if we could get from staff some sort of understanding of what our real options are to the non-performing projects. I guess we have the right to seize the property, or if that may not be the correct term, but we have a lot of money tied up in these projects. We are actually, as I understand, supplementing the ones that are not able to cover their obligations through our general fund, so it's a drain on our overall capacity to be solvent. So I think in addition to just the update of the facts, it would be very helpful to get some real recommendations on what our realistic options are now that we may know more about where we are.
Excellent. Agreed. Commissioner McGee, I'm sorry.
It's all right. Commissioner, I also would like to discuss low-income housing tax credits in Section 42. You know, I've been on the commission for going on 7 years now, and I will tell you there seems to be this fear by our staff, administration in particular, about this particular kind of development, because apparently prior to my time, somebody had proposed a low-income housing tax credit deal. The commission voted it down, and we were sued in regard to that. I don't know all the details or what the basis of that project was. I know there's people in this room here at the table that are familiar with that. And I guess the part that frustrates me is there doesn't seem to be a lot of discretion left to the commission any longer about these developments. We, as a result of this lawsuit, we developed a criteria for low-income housing tax credit projects. And if you meet that criteria, then you're automatically through the door and we can't vote no.
Right.
So as you know, there was a presentation to this exact committee a month or so ago, maybe less than that, where, you know, they brought up a deal.
Right.
And I came out and said all the concerns that I had, and then Administrator Bach said, there isn't anything you can do anyway, you can't vote no. So I don't know why I said anything.
I'm not sure that's exactly how it came out, but, and it is so funny you should bring that up, because we're going to open that discussion in 2 more items on tonight's agenda.
Okay.
You had asked last month that our staff go through and look at, for new housing starts within the last, I believe it was 5 years, that we look at how many of those were low-income tax credit projects
Right.
versus other kinds of incentives that we might give or other kinds of financing. So we're going to have that report, and we're going to open that discussion tonight. And then, depending on how we discuss tonight, we'll move to a further discussion at our upcoming meetings. But absolutely, we will.
So would it be all right tonight then to move forward to say, make a motion to adopt these, we have to take action here, so make a
That's
motion to adopt all of these with the exception to the LIHTC policy and the TIF policy to be voted on at a later date?
Alternately, could we vote to adopt them as they stand tonight, with the understanding that we could modify them based on upcoming discussions on Section 42 and TIF?
As long as they come up again, I'm fine with either way. I just want to know that within a reasonable time frame, they're going to come up again. I just don't want it to get away from us.
Exactly.
That's all I care about.
Yes, ma'am.
Further question, we're voting to move these on to the full commission.
That is correct. That is correct.
just a couple points as it relates to the TIF, what's stated in this document. It references state statutory requirements, and one of the state statutory requirements is a feasibility study. So we're required to do a feasibility study. It may be such that when we do the feasibility study, the project appears that it's going to be a successful project, and at times, as Commissioner Walters has pointed out, it may turn out that for whatever reason the project doesn't perform as well as originally projected. Also, a TIF project, in accordance with state statute, requires a project plan, and that project plan will go before the commission each time. There's public hearings. And so there is the opportunity for the commission to say, based on that project plan and the feasibility study, should we go forward with that project? I just wanted to point out those, I'll say, controls that are in place. And I guess a third one is an individual project plan may also require a development agreement, and we can put constraints on the developer through that development agreement, and we've done that. And I think it's really our objective to do that and look closely at the economic feasibility of TIF projects before we move those forward. I think those were the additional points. Charles did remind me, I think when we had our discussion last week, given our timeline of when the next standing committee meeting is, that we wanted to bring the TIF discussion before you in the March standing committee.
That's right, because we moved up the deadline for submitting materials, so.
Thanks.
Great. Okay, so the TIF discussion then, we will have in our March meeting, and the Section 42 discussion we will open tonight, and then have the ability to carry that forward if we choose. So I guess I would entertain a motion on these three policies, however we choose to word that motion.
Well, I move that we adopt all the policies, understanding that the two items, the LIHTC and the TIF components of the economic development policies, will be reviewed within a reasonable amount of time.
Second?
So there is a motion and a second to approve all three with the provision that the low-income housing tax credit and TIF portions of the economic development policy be revisited when those discussions take place. There is a second. Roll call, please.
Aye.
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 Aye. Thank you very much. That takes care of that item on our agenda. And item number 4 then is a discussion of our revolving loan fund program. I believe Charles Brockman will lead that discussion.
I'll make a
George
few
Brackett.
opening remarks if I can.
Shows you what I know.
We will certainly work diligently to get that TIF report done as early as possible for you to review. Staff has been looking at, some of us are not new to the organization, but we've been with economic development for a shorter period of time, and we've wanted to look back on all of our incentives and certainly identify any trends. And if there's opportunity for improvement or maybe just walking away from incentives that have maybe outlived their usefulness in our community, that those are the types of things we should come discuss with you and maybe perhaps give staff recommendation on. And so that's kind of what we're here to do tonight on one incentive in particular, and to throw out acronyms like our federal counterparts, the EDA's RLF, so Economic Development Administration Revolving Loan Fund. It's an incentive we've had here since the 80s. Maybe to start the discussion is what was the purpose of this incentive when it was first created? And again, it was more to service small business that had financial gaps in terms of getting their project financed. And long story short, in 1985, the federal EDA program put in roughly $600,000. the city of Kansas City, Kansas also contributed $225,000. We started this revolving loan fund, or RLF program in Kansas City, Kansas. A few years later, we outsourced that to a company called Citywide Development, and they ran it, Charles, until what year? 2010. I think there was a summary document included in your packet. In 2010, the EDA came in and said, hey, I don't think you should have this third party administering this program. Plus, there's some issues. It's time to kind of clean up some of the accounts. And so Charles Brockman, at that point, took it over, or didn't take it over. He was asked and assigned the task of, hey, we need to bring this back into our organization and you need to clean it up. And Charles did a lot of outreach with other communities that were successfully running that, and we set it up. And he's going to speak to that here in a moment. But what we're finding is that there are hurdles in offering this as an incentive. So there's hurdles both on the administrative side of it as well as getting money to the small businesses that need it. So I'll focus first on the small business type hurdles.
Can I ask a question on that?
Yes.
So I understand that to highlight the history, purpose, and challenges of administering the program, to what end? To what purpose? Do you have to report this? Are we trying to make changes in the program? Are we possibly dropping the program?
I think that's all of the above is the answer to that.
Okay.
I think if you're asking staff recommendation, we're probably leaning towards, because of all the hurdles that are in place, moving away from offering it.
Okay.
And Charles has had communication with other communities, and they're experiencing the same type of difficulties. So I guess we're at this crossroads. Either we walk away from the program, or federal legislation needs to be enacted so that the federal policies that the EDA's program is mired in, you need changes at that level to eventually come down and allow us to make changes. So from our end, small business, the hurdles are paying Davis-Bacon or prevailing wage. There's a ratio requirement, 2 to 1, so for every dollar you get from the program, you have to have 2 private dollars matching it. All the hurdles, all of those programs are exactly what a small business that's coming to you for gap financing isn't going to be able to overcome. And so we've been recently able to successfully make loans by looking a little bit differently, taking a departure from what our policy, the UG policy with RLF, kind of moving away from the cap in terms of what the largest amount of loan you can make, but still working within the confines of what the federal restrictions are in terms of the match, and if you're doing improvements, paying prevailing wage. But at the end, to sum it up in a nutshell from my perspective, we service 14 loans, and that takes 3 staff members, 2 from finance, 1 from economic development. We maintain about 3 different spreadsheets because in 2011, the EDA's online reporting system went offline, and they have not put it back online, but they require you to maintain very specific information so that you can do a data dump when it magically comes back online. So there are some hurdles, and again, Charles maybe can touch real briefly on what he's taught to his counterparts in other communities, and that they are in fact experiencing the same type of difficulties.
And if I could interject just real quickly, another possible outcome here would be that maybe we take the concept of this program as we originally implemented, take the concept but tweak how it's implemented, and still have this vehicle, still have this capacity to provide gap finance, but differently than we've done it before, and potentially with less restriction, potentially with less reporting requirement, so it opens up, I think, a rich discussion here.
Good evening, Commissioners. I'll just touch on 2 of the entities that I talked to. When we first took over the RLF, the EDA hired a company called MoCan to come down and help straighten out the citywide files. And so I talked with Gary Miller. He's a fiscal loan manager. And I was just chatting with him, seeing how his loans are doing, how's everything going with his part. And there's a certain percentage, we cannot have more than 25% of our capital base at one time in our account. So we have to have 75% of our income of our RLF money out. Well, speaking with Gary, for the second reporting cycle in a row, they've had over 25%. And he's basically saying that they had 3 loans. They have 2 of them are USDA microloans for rural, and the other one is a EDA RLF. So the problem that they're having, excuse me, the problem they're having is they can't find applicants that qualify. So I talked with another entity, Craig Stevens, EDC, Loan Executive Director of the Kansas City Economic Development Corporation, and they have an RLF program as well. Recently, they were over the 25%, just like everybody else seems to be, including us, but they did a couple big loans, so they are back to having 85% out, so they're not having to sequester funding. But speaking with Craig, he basically is kind of questioning the value of the program because of all the hurdles, and he feels that it's too restrictive as well.
And, and it's too restrictive because of the federal regulations.
Yes,
Right.
we were discussing, for instance, like a new business, small business, entrepreneur coming in, having to match, like our RLF, we have for every $50,000 you have to borrow, or you have to have 1 new employee. For every dollar you borrow from the EDA revolving loan fund, you have to match 2. So if you're borrowing $5,000, you have to come up with $10,000. That's not feasible for a new entrepreneur. So it is a lot of hurdles. If they are doing any kind of remodeling, if they're going to get a building, they're going to remodel, they have to use Davis-Bacon. Davis-Bacon is anything over $2,000 with the EDA. So that's very restrictive as well.
Are we aware of any movement by anyone in Congress or in the administration to try and get a rewrite of the rules to make it more amenable?
In our discussions with the regional representatives from EDA, no. And in fact, we've been pushing for quite some time, over a year, saying we see that there are so many burdens with this program. And I'm not sure if Greg Kendall's still here. I mean, we've been working with Wyandotte Economic Development Council to help us market this program and maybe even move it away from the acquisition or repair of property just to purchasing fixed assets so that it wouldn't be subjected to the Davis-Bacon or prevailing wage. And we're stuck. Our cycle right now is Charles is doing such an effective job of servicing loans that the more we get, the outstanding loans are getting paid out, but we're not creating any new loans. We're just getting further and further away from that 25%. And so more of the funds are going into the sequestered federal dollars than are available to make a loan. And if you look at the last few projects we've done, we've been able to manipulate the policy and get approval from the EDA. But and Charles, correct me if I'm wrong, but our policy caps a loan at $200,000. So if you look at the 2 loans we've most recently done, there's a $450,000 loan and a $300,000 loan. And I think they've been, although they won't acknowledge that there's problems and that other communities are having the same problems, they're very willing to allow us to go over our own policy cap to make these loans. So I want to go back to something you guys had said earlier. I think there is a huge need for a gap financing program here, whether it's small business, micro loans, all the way up to getting these other deals done. I don't have the exact definition of what that is. I just know that for what staff has been experiencing in offering this program, I don't see that it's a break-even deal for us in terms of the staff time that's invested and the loans we're able to put out successfully. I think Charles even mentioned, since 2010, we've had 5 out of 11 loans actually successfully come to fruition. So it's not a great batting average, and it's not a reflection on Charles or what we're doing. It's just that's how restricted this program is, and I think it's just, again, if it's not serving that initial purpose to help gap financing for small businesses, and maybe we can identify a better tool to do that by.
And I will say that I've been very frustrated a couple of times when I've talked with small business owners who wanted a small amount of money, not necessarily for a gap, but they wanted a small, like a micro loan, to enhance some aspect of their business. But the restrictions placed on the RLF was that, for example, they had to create a job as a result of the business improvements they would undertake with this loan. Well, there was no way they were going to create a job, although it certainly would enhance their business. And so I've been very frustrated by the current restrictions placed on this. And I know Commissioner Murguia, you and I have talked about this more than once.
Yes, we have.
So I guess with that, we would open the discussion for, really, we have a recommendation here that we consider abandoning the current structure of the revolving loan fund program. But I think we've had agreement here at the table that we definitely could find uses for micro loans, for business, for community development, for whatever it might be. And our challenge then would be, can we come up with a structure that might enable us to do that type of lending or facilitate that type of lending, but with fewer restrictions than we found through the RLF program?
But what you're saying is if we did not continue with this program, we would not access federal dollars. There would be no matching funds from the federal government.
Not like this current program is
Okay.
set up, correct?
Right.
I think oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner McGee.
That's all right.
I would just say that where we are from a staff perspective is we're in that next reporting cycle. So I think the EDA wants to hear from us, are you going to continue the program? And if you are, you've got to go back and repair some of the reporting discrepancies that exist because of their system being down. Or are you going to do, or is there a different request? And I think that's where we are in terms of staff's perspective or need for direction on this.
So we'll open the discussion. Commissioner Murguia.
So, first I have a couple of questions about the RLF, and then, as you know, Commissioner McKiernan, I'm full of ideas for how to make this happen. So, the RLF fund, the outstanding loans that you have then, if you abandon this fund, what happens to them?
Well, they're forgiven. No, I wish.
That's all right.
We can
I'm all
make
for
that commitment right now. I think part of where Charles and I have been discussing it, and certainly with Mr. Bach, is there an opportunity just to engage the EDA and say, look, it's not working, and we know we're not the only community. Is there a possibility to get our initial investment that we put into this program back out? You guys take whatever is already in sequestered funds anyway. I mean, we've made over $1 million worth of loans in the last 3 years. We would offer to, if they want us to continue servicing those loans in the same fashion we have. But we just think that there's got to be a better use of both UG funds if they're available in UG staff time, as well as keeping the partnership with WIDEC to offering an incentive that actually has a better batting average, I guess, for lack of a better term.
So, several questions.
Yes.
So, the next question is, do you think, though, I might be putting you a little bit on the spot here. First of all, for disclosure purposes, half of this money was lent to build the new grocery store in Argentine. So I am intimately familiar with how this fund works, just so that you know what's going on. And it wasn't fun, let me tell you. But do you think this loan would be more usable if there was another fund offered by the unified government that they could leverage and meet this other criteria with?
Quite possibly, yes. I
You
mean,
see
I
what I'm
think
saying?
I think it would help them in terms of the ratio required for every dollar to get out of the program to help on that side. I think where it doesn't help, though, Commissioner, is on the job creation side. And Charles, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we're about as low as we can get in terms of for every $50,000 you have to create at least one job. There's no opportunity to lower that threshold whatsoever.
Okay.
And so we don't have as much interaction with small business as I think we probably should as a department. I know with Greg, he really brings us in for any request that